Hey guys, I know I've said it a million times, but happy Earth Day. I've had a lot of work to do today, but just being outside has made it so much easier. It kind of cleared my mind to give me some good ideas for things that we can do between now and the end of the school year. Gave me a little bit of a distraction when I needed it, and it's the perfect place to catch up with the Indian in the cupboard. Now, if we were together in class, I'd be sitting in my cozy chair. That poor chair hasn't had me sitting in it for a long time. I wish it was right here on my porch. But I want you to look at how close we are to the end. So I hope that you've been able to keep up. I know sometimes read aloud is longer than what it would be in the classroom, but hey, we're home and we have a little bit of extra time. So when I'm done with this story, do I want you to take the AR test? The answer is yes. Do I want you to take the AR test if you're behind or you've missed parts? No, not at all. So the good news is every chapter is on the stream, and the first chapters are going to be on the bottom and the newer chapters are going to be on top. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in on this lovely Earth Day. We left off. Boone's arrow was taken out by Little Bear. He was bleeding. Patrick used like the whole part of the Band-Aid that he had cut that covers the entirety of Boone's chest. He has a little cotton swab that's soaked in Listerine, which is a disinfectant that's being covered by the Band-Aid, but without some medical intervention, Boone is not going to make it. And so that's why finding the key is so important. Yesterday, Omri found out that Gillian's rat is loose. He found out that the cord of his lamp had been chewed on by the rat, and that earlier that day when he was at school, that his father had pulled the carpet back, pulled some boards back, and he's trying to find the rat. And so, anyway, because Omri and Patrick know what's going on and the severity of the situation with Boone, they've decided to disobey his mother, pull back the carpet, and look into the opening on the floor. And that's where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back in. Want fire, make dance, call spirits, make Boone live. Omri looked at him for a moment, and he felt an ache in his throat that reminded him painfully of his babyish days, when he used to cry all the time. I can relate to Omri. Days he thought he had left behind forever. Little Bear, dancing won't do any good. The spirits won't help. We need a doctor. To get the doctor, we need the key. Would you help me find it? Little Bear didn't move a muscle. I help. Gently, Omri picked him up. He knelt on the floor and put his hand down the hole. Patrick held the light. Omri opened his hand, and Little Bear stood on it, looking around into the dusty, dark tunnel stretching way under the floor. I think it's somewhere down here, said Omri, on the other side of that wooden wall. You'll have to find a way through, a hole or a crack or something. We'll give you all the light we can, but it's bound to be awfully dark on the other side. Do you think you can do it? I go, said Little Bear. Right, start looking for a way through. Little Bear, a tiny but vulnerable figure, vulnerable means something can happen, strode off through the dust into the darkness under the floor. Omri pulled the lampshade off the bedside lamp, and he thrust the bulb down into the hole. He couldn't get his head in to watch, and Little Bear went out of sight almost immediately. Is there a way through? He whispered down into the tunnel. Oh, I have to stop for a second. Don't forget that the hole is in Omri's floor. There's an opening about a foot deep, and below Omri's room is his parents' room. So this is the ceiling of his parents' bedroom below him. Sorry, guys. Is there a way through? He whispered down the tunnel. Yes, came Little Bear's voice. Big hole. I go through. Omri, give light. Omri pushed the light down as far as he could, but the base of the lamp made it stick. Can you see anything? He whispered, as loudly as he dared. There was no answer. He and Patrick knelt there for an age. There wasn't a sound. Then Patrick said suddenly, did he take his bow and arrows? Why might Little Bear need a weapon down in this opening under the floor? Why might bow and arrow be useful? No. Why? What if, Omri? What if Little Bear meets the rat? Omri had totally forgotten about the rat in the excitement of realizing what had happened to the key. Now he felt a strange jerk in his chest, as if his heart had hiccuped. He bent his head till his face was in the hole. He could smell the dust. The bright bulb was between him and the place where Little Bear had presumably gone through a hole in the joist into the next section of the floor. A hole! What could make a hole right through a joist? What else could make a hole but a rat gnawing away all day long? A rat at this moment who was out on his nighttime prowl. A hungry rat who hadn't eaten for 24 hours. A pink-eyed, needle-toothed, omnivorous giant rat. Holy cow, the adjectives. And guys, I'm going to tell you, I'm distracted, trying to stay focused. I don't know if you saw my video just a little bit ago, but I have this interesting little caterpillar that I found on my table, and he's made his way from the edge of the table across the charging cable for my laptop, and he's trying to climb up the screen as we speak. Wouldn't that be cool if he could climb up and we could see him? I'm not going to disturb him. He's on an adventure. Okay. What great adjectives for a rat. Pink-eyed, needle-toothed instead of sharp-toothed, needle-toothed. Omnivorous, which means he eats meat and vegetables. And, of course, giant. Little Bear, Omri called frantically into the blankness. Come back! Come back! Utter silence. And then he heard something. But it wasn't Little Bear's voice. It was a scuttering sound of a rodent's hard little hairless feet on plaster. Little Bear! Omri. Excuse me, wrong voice. Omri! It was a voice from the room below. What are you doing up there? It was his mother. Then quite distinctly he heard his father's voice. I can hear that rat pattering overhead. It's probably keeping the boys awake. I'd better go up, said his mother. A door closed below them, and they heard her feet coming up the stairs. Even this dire prospect hardly had power to do more than push Omri's desperation one step further. He probably wouldn't have moved from his place on the floor if Patrick didn't act swiftly. Quick, light off, into bed! He pulled Omri up, snatched the lamp out of his hand, and switched the bulb off. The candle was still down the hole. Patrick shoved the floorboard roughly back into position and moved the carpet so that it more or less covered the boards if you didn't look closely. Then he pushed Omri into his bed, covered him up. The footsteps were nearly at the door, and he had just flung himself down on the folding bed when the door opened. Omri lay there with his eyes squeezed shut, thinking, have you ever pretended to be asleep when your parents came into your room and you knew you were supposed to be in bed like Omri? Lost my place. Omri lay there with his eyes squeezed shut, thinking, don't turn the light on. Don't turn the light on. Light was coming into the room from the landing, but not enough to see anything much. His mother stood there for what seemed like 100 years. Finally, she said, are you boys asleep? Needless to say, she got no reply. Omri, she tried once more. Then after another 100 years, during which Omri imagined Little Bear bitten in half by the rat underneath where he was lying, the door closed, leaving them in darkness. Wait, breathed Patrick. It was torture to wait. The rat had stopped moving when all the scuffling and footsteps started. That was something. But now it was quiet again. Omri imagined it creeping towards its prey, its pink nose twitching, its albino whiskers trembling hungrily. Albino is white. Oh, how could he have let Little Bear go down there? Boone's death would at least not have been his fault, but if Little Bear was killed, Omri knew he would never forgive himself. At long last, the living room door closed, and both boys jumped out of bed again. Patrick reached the light first. Omri grabbed it, but Patrick insisted on looking first to see if Boone was still breathing. He was. They rolled the carpet back and lifted the board, terrified that every moment would attract the grown-ups below. The homemade candle was burning away in the gloom like a little torch in a mine, throwing its eerie light down a tunnel. Omri lay down flat. He didn't dare raise his voice, but he called softly, "Little Bear, are you there? Come back. You're in terrible danger." "Oh, goodness, why doesn't he come?" Omri whispered frenziedly. At that moment, they did hear something. It was hard to identify the sound. It was the rat, all right, but what was it doing? There was no running sound, just a tiny shock, as if it had made one short, sudden movement. A pounce? Omri's heart was in his mouth. There were other sounds. If he had not got used to straining his ears to catch the voices, he might not have even heard it. But he did hear it, and hope nearly lifted him off the ground. It was a faint, light scrambling sound, the sound of a small body getting through a small hole in a hurry. Omri pulled the lamp back out of the hole and thrust his arm in, his hand open. Almost at once, he felt Little Bear run into his hand. Omri closed his fingers just as something warm and furry brushed against him. He snatched his arms out, grazing his knuckles against the wood. There was something else in his hand. Something cold. Something knobbly. Twice as heavy as Little Bear. He opened his fingers, and both boys leaned over to look. Sitting on Omri's palm, filthy and bedraggled, but triumphant, dun, 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 was Little Bear, and cradled in his little arms, trailing cobwebs and a red satin ribbon, are you inferring, was the missing key. "You've done it! Oh, Little Bear, good for you! Now quick," said Omri. "Patrick, get the candle up and put the floor back. I'll find the Red Cross man." Reckless now, they switched the light back on. Patrick, being as quiet as he could, replaced the floorboard and the carpet while Omri looked through the figures jumbled in the biscuit tin. Luckily, the Army medical orderly was right on top, still holding his precious doctor's bag. Little Bear, meanwhile, stood beside the pallet bed on which Boone was lying, staring at him, still clutching the key in his arms. Omri took it from him. He thrust the plastic man into the cupboard and turned the key. He made himself count to 10 while Patrick watched, pop-eyed and scarcely breathing. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Why is that such a hard wait? Then he opened the door. There stood his old friend Tommy, his bag at his feet, rubbing his eyes and frowning around him. His face cleared when he saw Omri. "Well, if it ain't you again. I don't half pick my moments to drop off to sleep, I must say. Thundering great many whining overhead. I thought I was a goner." He's talking about bombs, guys. "What's a mini?" "What, another of you?" asked Tommy. "I must have eaten too much cheese for my dinner. Shouldn't give us cheese before a big attack. Very hard on your stomach, especially when it's churned up anyway. What's a mini?" "It's our name for a Minenwerfer. That's one of them big German shells. Make a horrible row, they do, even before they land. A sort of whistle that gets louder and louder, and then kaboom! Them blokes with my job, has to pick ourselves up and run as quick as you like to where it fell. If it fell in a trench, to take care of the wounded soldiers. We've got a wounded man here we want you to take care of, said Omri. Oh, yes? The old redskin again? No, it's another one. Could you step onto my hand? Omri lifted him to where Boone lay, and Tommy at once knelt beside him and began a professional examination. So a quick little sketch here of Omri's hand coming out of the hole in the floor. You can see Little Bear right in the middle of his palm holding on to the key, and brushing Omri's fingers is the rat. So look at how close that was. He's in a bad way, he said after a few moments. He could do with a blood transfusion, really. I'll have to take his bandage off and look at his wound. He was cutting it off with a minute pair of scissors as he spoke. As the bandage opened up, the anxious watcher saw that the tuft of tissue was red with blood. But Tommy said, bleeding stopped. That's one good thing. What was it, a bullet? An arrow, said Omri. Little Bear shivered all over. Oh, yes, of course. I can see that now. Well, I'm not much up on arrow wounds. My head's not still in there, I hope. Oh, he's talking about the tip of the arrow, the head of the arrow. No, it was pulled out. Good, good. Lucky it missed his heart. Well, I'll see what I can do. He got the hypodermic needle out of his bag and fiddled with it for a moment. Then he plunged the needle into Boone's chest. After that, he stitched up his wound, put a dressing on it, and got Little Bear to help him peel off the rest of the old Band-Aid. You a pal of his, are you? He asked the Indian. Little Bear stared at him, but he did not deny it. Then look here, when he wakes up, you keep giving him these here pills. They're iron, you see. Build him up, and these as well. They're for his pain. What we have to hope is that there won't be an infection. We need penicillin, said Patrick, who had once had a bad cut on his foot that turned septic. Tommy looked at him blankly. Penicillin? What's that? Omri nudged Patrick. They hadn't discovered it in his time, he whispered. All right, I'm going to stop for a second. Some super cool things are happening here. So teeny tiny needle. He has to have iron, and iron is in your blood. When you have low iron, it causes you to feel bad. People can have low iron without losing blood, just depending on their health. But when I go to donate blood at the Shepherd Blood Center in Evans, before I ever sit down, before they ever put the needle in and draw my healthy blood for someone who might need it, they always prick my finger. And the reason that they prick my finger is to see what my iron level is, and that's like hemoglobin. And if your iron is low, they don't take your blood. And if your iron is just right, that's when you make your blood donation. So someone who's in Boone's situation could greatly use a blood donation. But of course, there's no blood donor in Omri's house right now. So the medicine that Tommy is giving Little Bear to give Boone are iron pills, and that helps Boone's body because he's lost so much blood. And then he also has pain medicine. So Patrick said, what about penicillin? You guys might not realize that. When you get sick and you get certain infections, your doctor gives you a certain medication, and that medication makes the infection go away, penicillin. But Tommy is a First World War soldier. Penicillin hadn't been invented yet. So the best thing I can suggest is a drop of brandy, said Tommy, and taking out a flask, poured something down Boone's throat. Look there, he said. He's getting a bit of color already. He'll open his eyes soon. I wouldn't wonder. Keep him warm. That's the ticket. Now I must be getting back. Waking up, I mean. If that there Minnie's landed, I'll be in demand. No mistake. Omri carried him back to the cupboard. Tommy, he said, what if the Minnie had fallen on you? Couldn't have done it, could I? If I had of, I wouldn't have been having this dream, would I? I'd be singing with a heavenly choir. Cheer, Cheerby, hurry up and shut the door. I think I can hear him calling the stretcher bearer already." Omri smiled gratefully at Tommy. He hated to send him back, knowing what was going to happen, but obviously he wanted to go. "Goodbye, Tommy. Thanks, and good luck." And he shut the door. All right. So I'm going to stop there. It's not the end of the chapter, but that's a good stopping point. My goodness, without that key, Omri wouldn't have Tommy, who has all of these small, very important resources to save Boone. So Boone's wound has been cleaned, he's been stitched up, and he's been bandaged properly. He has medications to help him, but that doesn't mean he's out of the danger yet. He still has to recover. So we'll find out what happens when I see you guys tomorrow. Have a good evening and happy Earth Day.